Okay, we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our virtual session, USG Alumni Talks. My name is Dania. I work at the American Center Tashkent. And as we are observing World Health Day today, we have invited a special guest speaker, a contemporary issues exchange program alum, Dr. Azizbek Boltaev. Dr. Boltaev, welcome to the session, and thank you so much for being our speaker today.
Thanks for inviting me, Dania. It is an honor to be here.
Thank you. Let me introduce you to our audience. Azizbek Boltaev, Doctor of Medicine, is a psychiatrist with more than 18 years of clinical and research experience in the field of addiction medicine, mental health, and HIV. Dr. Boltaev holds a position as a Director of Human Research and Development Center in SOM in Bukhara. He is a graduate of Bukhara State Medical Institute and has also conducted research fellowship at Brandeis University in internship at Harvard Medical School. Dr. Boltaev served in technical expert roles of various international bodies, including assignments as a core member of the UN Reference Group on Injecting Drug Use, the Steering Committee of the Eurasian Harm Reduction Network, an expert for the Technical Review Panel of the Global Fund for Fight AIDS, TB, and Malaria. He regularly consults WHO, UNODC, USAID, and CDC on issues related to the development of public health programs in Central Asia and Eastern Europe. Dr. Boltaev continues his daily clinical practice in Bukhara and sees patients with mental and substance misuse disorders. And today, Dr. Boltaev will be talking about management of emotional stress. For all of you who are watching us, we would love to hear from you. So please leave your questions in the comments and we will pull them up after the presentation and our guest speaker will answer them. Okay, Dr. Boltaev, thank you again for coming. I am giving the floor to you.
Hello?
Hello, Dr. Boltaev, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I want to thank you again for coming, and we'll need your presentation to be uploaded on the screen. And I'm giving the floor to you.
Okay, Daniva, before I start, I would like to ask you how we will proceed with the questions. We'll be able to get questions from viewers, participants, and respond as they come, or we will respond them at the end of the presentation.
Usually we pull the questions up at the end of the presentation. So once you finish with your presentation, we will go to the questions and answers session, if that's okay with you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see how it goes. I would want to make this talk as interactive as possible, and let's see if it will be possible. Nevertheless, I have a presentation to show you today. It is brief, and I will give more time for you to ask questions, and I'll try to respond them as best as I can. So let's go. Start.
Okay.
Today we will be talking about management of emotional stress, and let me briefly outline what we will be talking about. We want to define what is stress and what is distress, and how does stress affect our health and why it is important, and why do people differ in their responses to stressors, and what can we do about stress. These are basic questions, and we will focus on these four, but you are welcome to add to this outline your priority questions. So, what is stress? The term stress was coined in 1956 by Hans Selye, who was Hungarian-Canadian medical doctor, endocrinologist, and he observed different patients with various diseases, and he saw that people have some uh, non-specific symptoms of diseases, which means that many very different diseases have similar uh, symptoms, and they are not specific to one particular disease. So, and he calls these non-specific symptoms. And stress, according to him, is a non-specific response of the body to any demand made upon it. So, uh, people often call stress as something which affects us, that for example someone is making joke of me, or shouting, or trying to beat me, or prosecute me. So people call this as something uh, as stress, but actually our body's response, our organism's response, is a stress, and the factors which influence us, they are called stressors. So the stressor, the major stressor, which we have seen in the last 1.5 years, is a COVID pandemic. And this pandemic really destroyed many lives, killed many people, and we do not some of us lost friends or loved ones due to this pandemic, and it was indeed a major stressor. But stress or stressor may be not only bad ones. Positive stressors also exist. Like it's one example. It's an opportunity to meet a beautiful woman or girl, and you go there and you feel shy and do not know how to behave, how to speak, how to approach her. Or it may be stressor for a woman to meet a man, and she can feel the same way, and be shy and not knowing how to act and how to behave. So, and stressors, I believe that most of the alumni went through, and those who studied at school, at universities, college, went through the deadlines of preparing to exams. So, and this is a major uh, stressor. So, and now we know what is stress. Stress is our body's response, and the factors that influence us are the stressors. So these might be any factor, factors outside of our body, and factors inside of our body. So what happens to people at that moment? Uh, when stressors influence us, there are three phases we when go through, and the first is alarm reaction. So if anything happens to us, the first thing is alarm. That means that our stress hormones uh, released from our glands, and we feel intense heart rate, for example. We uh, may feel that we are sweating, we feel anxious, and these are alarm reactions. And on the second phase, we uh, try to resist this stress, and we try to put all our strength to resist it, and we try to adapt to it. And I believe, have felt this kind of phase in your life, and you, for some time, you are capable to resist this stress. But if this stress uh, continues to affect you for quite a long time, uh, you end up with exhaustion phase, where your strengths, your resources are just come to its end. And we need to learn how to avoid the exhaustion phase. We cannot avoid stresses, but we can learn how to avoid the third phase. And this is the main subject of our discussion today. So, how the stress affects our health? There is a picture which shows us how we respond to anger, pessimism, and depression, or chronic stressor. We may respond to this with unhealthy behaviors, with drinking, alcohol, using psychoactive drugs, narcotic drugs, and smoking. We may want to use caffeine to energize ourselves, to resist stress which we see. And at the end, research has shown that due to the stress, our autonomic nervous system depresses. We feel headaches, we have high blood pressure, and we have inflammation. And during the release of stress hormones, our immune system also gets suppressed. What does it mean? That our ability to resist diseases goes down. As you may remember, last year, when nobody knew how to treat people with COVID, English doctors discovered that dexamethasone, uh, medicine known from 1950s, is most effective drug to treat people with moderate and severe cases of COVID. And it helped to save many lives. But what is this drug? It is dexamethasone, and it is internal. It is a kind of uh, corticosteroid or hormone which our body produces itself when we are in stress. And um, you remember that many people died, and people or researchers explained the these high rates of death from COVID by the hyperimmune response from our body to the virus. And in order to reduce this hyperimmune response, doctors started using dexamethasone. So, and in these severe cases, dexamethasone or internal corticosteroids, hormones of the body are really useful. They help us to cope with high immune response. But when in chronic conditions, when chronic stresses affect our body, uh, we constantly, our body, our glands produce these stress hormones, and our uh, body has less and less strength or resources to fight bacteria, viruses, etc. And the research has shown that those who live under stress, they more often, uh, about 47% more often have cold compared to those who live with less strength, or their level of strength is lower. And due to the stress and high levels of hormones in the blood, our vessels and heart is affected. And because of these hormones, we as humans may experience heart attacks. We can get high blood pressure, and our vessels do not work properly, and it uh, brings us to cardiovascular diseases. So, in short, stress may not directly cause illnesses, but it creates conditions in our body that makes us more vulnerable uh, to various diseases, and it affects our physiology and behavior. So, one example of severe stress, probably you remember the movie Star Wars and Carrie Fisher, beautiful actress in that movie. And this actress unexpectedly died in 2016 at age of 60. And it was a really shock for her fans. But even bigger shock happened the day after. Her daughter Debbie also died just day after. And those who investigated the case explained the death of her daughter by severe stress. So, why people respond differently to stress? You, of course, understand that not all people die or react so intensely as Debbie responded to the death of her mom. And some people experience grief, but they recover pretty soon and continue to live. And while others, they lose their meaning of life because their loved ones are not with them anymore, and they do not feel comfortable or meaningful to continue living without them. And actually, there are two types of responses to stress which define how will you feel, and how this stressful situation will end. And the responses might be twofold. The first is emotion focused. That means that the person which experiences severe stress is focused on its emotions, and that person core belief which he thinks it might be not very consciously, but core belief here the person has that I cannot change things. And because of this, a person may feel depressed, panicked. The person, due to the stress, may feel anger or helpless or hopeless. So this is emotion focused response. And there is a second type of response, which I call it intelligence or solution focused response. A core belief here is I'm in charge of the situation. And people who demonstrate these kind of stress response to the stress, they are much calmer, they are focused, and they are resourceful. And you may correctly guess that Debbie responded emotionally to the stress, to the tragedy which happened in her family, to the death of her mom. And she got depressed, and she believed that she cannot change, and might be she felt that her life is meaningless, or any other uh, thoughts which brought her to the situation which she could not tolerate, the level of stress she had at the moment. And so, what do you think she could do at the moment? How she could respond to the death of her mom? If her core belief was, "I am in charge of the situation. I am in charge on what will happen next." For example, I am in charge. For the memory of my mom, I'm in charge to organize everything beautifully, as she would be happy that my daughter is organizing everything, and he is paying tribute to me, to my memory, and she is really uh, showing that she is a grown up and responsible person. And if she would have this kind of belief, this would help her to focus on solutions, on doing something, instead of getting depressed with the situation. So, getting back to the COVID-19 pandemic, it was something new to all of us. None of us expected that this situation will happen in our life, and we were unprepared to the pandemic. But we could prepare ourselves to stress in general, that if something happens, very big tragedy, very big maybe disaster happens, I will behave in a way which would be which would correspond with my core values, and I would respect myself with this response. And in our response, there are a couple of zones which we could select to ourselves during the stress, like COVID-19, for example. Uh, for fear zone, as you remember, many people they grabbed food, toilet paper, medications that they didn't need. They panicked. They spread emotions related to fear and anger. They complained frequently about that lockdown is everywhere, and they cannot do their routine work, they cannot earn money, they cannot see their friends, and they people who are in fear zone, they forwarded messages, panicking message that masks do not work, staying at home doesn't work, and all of us die. Doctors do not know how to deal with the disease, and they spread it any these kind of panicking message through messengers, through phones, and they got mad easily. But it is not the limit of the person. A person may choose to learn from the situation and say that I start to give up uh, what I can't control. So if I can't control that someone has died, for example, I lost uh, 12 years ago my dad, and it was very painful, but I cannot control it. It was up to the God. It was his decision. As I'm a firm believer, Muslim, and I thought that it is God's decision, and I cannot control. I can't do anything but pray for my father and thank God for those years which He granted to me to be with Him, to feel His love, to feel and see His care about us. So, and I choose to learn from that experience. People who are in learning zone, they stop compulsively consuming what hurts them from food or news. So people at some point they uh, understood they need to switch off their messengers, their social media. They started to limit themselves from garbage food and garbage news. They started to become aware of the situation, and they started to think about how to act in this situation responsibly. And after a while, people started to learn. Not all of us, unfortunately, uh, but many of us learned to uh, evaluate the information which we received through various sources, if this is a fact or it is a fake news, before spreading to our loved ones, to our close friends. We started evaluating this kind of information, and we didn't want to spread panic. It is responsible behavior in the learning zone. So I recognized that we are all trying to do our best. For example, as you remember last year during summer in June and July, there were just tens of thousands phone calls to emergency to 103 number calling for emergency team to come to the houses where people sick with COVID, uh, panicking, feeling fever, coughing, and having difficult with breathing. They or their close ones, they called in hopes that the emergency team would arrive very quickly, as they used to see in the years before the pandemic. But because of the very big number of calls, medical emergency system was not able to react as quickly as they used to. And but they tried, they did their best to respond. And people who were in learning zone, they understood it, that it is impossible to arrive at as quick as it used to be. But people in fear zone, they blame doctors and nurses that they ignore their calls, and there were lots of fights, and there were lots of stress related to this. And people in learning zone, they can get to the growth zone. What does it mean, growth zone? We have seen lots of people during the COVID-19 pandemic, during the lockdowns, they have chosen to become volunteers to help people, to help old people who live alone, to help them to bring something from the drugstore, from the grocery store, just to allow them to stay home. Or people who lost their job, lost their sources of income. Volunteers, and many of us were among them, started to collect food and the groceries from uh, different sources and delivering these kind groceries and food to and medication to those in need. So it is a growth zone, and it was up to us to choose where we want to be, in the fear zone, saying that we cannot do anything, it is the end of life, or we could do something good at that uh, really difficult time. And for example, many people, doctors who worked in private clinics, in government clinics, and as many others, they stayed in lockdown at home. They have chosen to offer their services for free through internet, through phone calls. So they made their knowledge and talents available to people for free. And these people were in the growth zone. But it is not only uh, people. I mean, doctors were not the only people who offered their support and help and their talents and knowledge. There were psychologists, there were musicians who played their instruments very beautifully just to support the spirit of people in this difficult time. And people who have chosen to be in the growth zone, consciously or not, they were in the growth zone. They became empathetic to others, not only to others, but to themselves. They started to caring about themselves and others. And people started to thank and appreciate uh, the help and resources they received. You remember that there were cases when people around the globe, in our cities, in our countries, they did uh, uh, the actions when at some point during the day or evening they opened their windows and they applauded to doctors, to those volunteers who are working and those who are not staying at their home but they're going to their job, risking their own health, but to support life of all of us. And there were many people who joined this action, uh, and it was really beautiful. And I really enjoyed seeing it. And we have united globally, not just only in our street, in our apartment buildings, but we have united as a city, as a nation, as a humankind. So, and there are many ways how we can uh, choose and demonstrate in which capacity we behave. Are we in fear, or we are learners, or we are those who are growing at difficult times. And this is uh, diagram is specific to COVID-19, but it is in fact, the idea behind it is not related or restricted to the stress which we have seen experienced during the or continue experiencing during the pandemic. It may be relevant to any other stresses in our life. So we need to prepare ourselves beforehand. And this is my main message. If you want to manage your stress, you need to prepare to the stress. In a way, we react to the stress as we are trained to. If you remember, on the front page of my presentation, I have put a big ocean wave as a symbol of a major stressor. And as you see, there are people who enjoy this kind of stress. They try to find these kind of big waves to enjoy, because they are preparing themselves to enjoy there. And at the same time, there are people who are not trained to swim, to stay on the surface of the water when there is no wave, and they lose their lives, not because it is a big uh, stress or something which is not really unsolvable. They are losing their health, they are losing their lives, they are losing their relationship because they are not trained, they are not prepared for this kind of challenge in their life. And my key message or take home message from this talk to you is just prepare yourself to stresses. You do not know what kind of stresses would happen in your life, but you may prepare yourself generally or more widely. Whatever happens, whatever happens, I will respond to the stress, to the event which will happen in my life as calmly as possible. I want to respond in a way which would be a good example of behavior to my children, to my loved ones. So keeping in my mind, how do I want to respond to any major stressor, for example, like divorce, like day which Debbie gone through. She lost her mom, she lost her loved one, and unfortunately, we are determined. It is our destiny to go through this day at some point. All of us will lose at some point loved ones, and loved ones will at some point lose us, and it is a life. So if I regard this kind of situation something like uh, not tragic, it is sad truth, but it is not tragic because life is going on. My kids will continue living, their kids will continue living, and something if something is happening, it is happening for good. It is my firm belief, which helps me to adjust, to adapt to the stresses, to be more flexible, uh, to be more resilient in these kind of cases. So it is my conscious uh, uh, choice how to react. And it is important to think about how do I want to react? How will I react? We should not leave it up to that time when the stress happens and says it, I will think about at that moment. No, we better prepare ourselves beforehand. We train ourselves in our head. We train ourselves in our imagination, or we train ourselves in real situations like swimming pools to learn swimming before we see ourselves in the sea or in a big river. So this is a part which I wanted to discuss as a part of the presentation, and I would like to get back to you guys and allow you to ask questions and give maybe your reactions to what I have uh, discussed here. Thank you for your attention. Dania, uh,
Yes, thank you so much for the interesting presentation. Again, I want to remind to everyone, feel free to ask your questions in the chat boxes, both on Facebook and YouTube while we're live, and we will get them answered. We got a question from Dinoza Ali Mardonova. She is asking, okay, here's a question. Do you think yoga is effective to release stress? I think that's a great question.
yoga is extremely helpful in making a person resilient to the stress. Yes, and if your life is full of stress, go to the yoga. If yoga is available in your area, it is wonderful. But it is if it is not available, go and find online coach who could train you. There are lots of online, even free courses available on various platforms, including Coursera, and you can start learning yoga, how to react to this. In fact, I train my patients not yoga, but a technique which is a part of yoga exercises. It is meditation. I train my patients, I train people who suffer from depression, from anxiety, etc., to be mindful about their reactions, to meditate and calm down their mind in order to be more calm in this hectic, in this very stressful life. In some cases, we definitely cannot change the circumstances around us, but yoga and meditation, psychotherapy, auto training, these are the methods which help you to prepare yourself to be flexible, to be resilient to the stresses which are in your life. So the bottom line is yes, yoga is very effective. And it is a good point, a good question. Thank you, Dilnoza.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer. Next question from Gulshan Mahmudova. Thank you for useful information, Dr. Boltaev. Are there any red warning flags that indicate too much stress?
Mm-hmm. So, uh, if if you remember, I gave a definition of the stress, and there was a uh, word non-specific response, which means that responses or symptoms, as you call them, flags, are maybe not very specific, but of course, there are some common red flags or symptoms you may be aware of. Uh, it is exhaustion. For example, you came to your work very enthusiastic. You were happy to get the job uh, at the very first days or months or even year, and you believe that you will change the world with this job, and at some point you spend lots of time, lots of your energy to do the work wonderfully, and impress your boss, impress the clients you work with, and but after time you become less and less interested in your work. You are maybe even well paid for this work, but the job is not very interesting for you. It is not causing or giving you the same level of positive emotions at the very beginning, and you are starting to hate your boss, your co-workers, or some clients or all clients. You start thinking or start blaming people for very, very minor issues. You start reacting in a way which you would not think that proper reaction to someone's words, someone's behavior, and it is our reaction. So these kind of uh, responses from your side or from your loved ones or your coworkers may serve as red flags. Red flags also may include that symptoms of depression as well, that you may uh, uh, have difficulties with sleeping. You either cannot sleep well, you have nightmares, or you cannot get fall asleep, or you cannot just wake up because you are very sleepy. These can also be red flags of very high stress in your work or even depression. Uh, you may lose your interest in interacting with people who were your friends or colleagues you enjoyed working in their company, but now you try to avoid. You do not respond to their phone calls or do this with difficulty, and you do not socialize with people as used uh, be doing before. So these kind of unusual behaviors all may serve uh, as red flags. Not only behaviors, but also emotions you may feel, which are not very uh, typical for you. You may start overeating. You eat a lot, and why we eat a lot? Because we eat uh, a lot, and uh, uh, we have glucose entering our body, and this provokes joy in our brain. So we received some kind of reward of eating something. So our uh, body or our brain does not produce uh, hormones of joy of or happiness, endorphins, in healthy levels. The levels of hormones, these happiness hormones or joy hormones, they decrease, and they decrease during the stress.
Mhm. That's a great answer. Thank you so much. And another question comes with this: when do we need to see a doctor? So usually people don't take stress seriously. Or let's say all these red flags happen. So when do we have to go to see a doctor?
Uh, you need to see a doctor or a mental health professional who might be not a doctor but psychologist, for example, who deals with stress related situations. Anytime when you feel that you are not capable to solve this situation yourself.
Mhm.
In most cases, fortunately, we can solve situation without going to any doctor, to any psychologist or a psychiatrist, psychotherapist. But when we see that it's becoming very difficult, you try to be more focused, you try to be less reactive to the people's behavior or their words, but you get or end up with fighting, you end up uh, uh, depressed, or you end up again thinking that I want to leave the job which you valued very much before that, or you feel that you cannot correct your relationship with someone who you love. It is your husband, your wife, your kids, or your parents, or your parents, or step parents,
Mhm.
or uh, parents-in-law in uh, in cases of Uzbek women. So you need to go and see a specialist.
Mhm. Thank
And
you so
this
much.
the same applies to those who you think is under stress. If you see that your advices and your uh, uh, support didn't work, and the person is still having bad days, difficulties, and just get him to the doctor, get him to the mental health professional.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you so much for the answer. Let's move to the next question about yoga. Sayora Nazarova is asking, is it more helpful to take yoga with a trainer or by ourselves? And are there any disadvantages of yoga?
Uh, Everything is better if you have a good coach. Everything, even if you are learning language, learning some new skill, learning cut your hair. It is not very difficult thing compared to engineering, for example. But it is better to have someone who coaches you. So, and yes, of course, if you have someone who teaches you and does it well, it is much better. But not always it is possible to find a person in your area. But we have an online solution for that, for yoga, for meditation, for psychotherapy. Now, internet, Zoom, Skype, Telegram, WhatsApp. or video messaging devices or apps made this extremely accessible. Just use it. But if
Absolutely.
you think that you are capable to learn by yourself, seeing or reading books or getting video lessons, do it.
Thank you so much. Next question from Mavlon Bobohon. He thanks for your present interesting presentation, and he's asking what are the safest and easiest ways to release emotions from the body. The safest and
There,
easiest ways to
uh,
release.
I would not uh, say that I know the safest and the easiest solution to release stress, because it requires research and uh, in the on the other hand, every person might like one way of releasing stress, and the other people may dislike it, and it doesn't work with them. So every person needs to find his or her own way to release stress. But depending on stress, if there were lots of negative communication in my life or in my patient's life during the day or during a week, I suggest them to go to the shower and get the shower and just to imagine that these negative things go away with a uh,
Water.
shower which you receive. So you won't wash your out inside and outside of your body, every cell in your body. Just imagine it. And this is very simple, free, and powerful technique to release the stress. And uh, and uh, it is very important question how to release the stress and release the negative emotions, but you need to also learn how to feel yourself again with resources, with the energy, with physical energy, with emotional energy, with intellectual energy, and the fourth is spiritual energy. You need to learn this. You need to find sources where you get these kind of energies. Food and good healthy food is a source of energy, physical energy, but not the only one. Physical energy source is a sporting or doing sports, physical exercises. We know, most of us know this, but we do not do this. Emotional source of uh, helping yourself to recharge yourself, like you recharge every day your phone, right, or your computer, your laptop. But do you recharge yourself emotionally every day? No, unfortunately, we do not do that. But we can do it. We can recharge our kids. We can recharge our spouses. How? Just say beautiful words. I love you. I adore you. You are a very important person to me. And I'm happy to be your husband. I'm happy to be your father. I'm proud to be your wife, for example, if it is a case of female. And just touch them, just hug them, kiss them. These are all the free uh, sources of emotional energy.
Thank you so much for that. Those were great tips and advice. And I think that was the last question for today. And it's actually 1 hour past. Time flew very fast. Thank you so much, Dr. Boltaev, for coming today, for giving us interesting and informative presentation. That was really, really interesting and remarkable. Thanks everyone for joining us today, for your comments and questions. And we hope to see you on our next USG Alumni Talks.
Thank you, Dania, and thank you to everyone who participated for your time and for your interest in the topic. And enjoy your life. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.